backed by popular demand, because you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. You're Godzilla of the truth in America, bringing you real news. Raabi, thanks for being with us, sir.
Well, thank you for calling me Real News.
You're always real news, Raabi, and I always love having you on. So, okay, Raabi, so Israel yesterday, the Knesset passing the controversial Jewish nation-state law, looking at this as a non-Jew, me, Catholic, from the outside, I say to myself, okay, well, they seem to be marginalizing almost 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel. These are citizens, Raabi. I mean, they're part of the country. They vote, they own land, they're citizens. And seems like they're getting kicked here to the curb, and they don't have enough representation. There's only about 18 Palestinians that serve in the Knesset. Now they also said they're going to make Hebrew the country's national language, and the Palestinians really upset by this, saying they're comparing it to South Africa's apartheid. Can you help us understand what the impact is on the Palestinians with this law, and what compelled the Israeli government to get this through the Knesset and pass it now?
I certainly can't tell you what the Israelis were thinking. I think the whole thing is obviously a tempest in a teapot. It simply formalizes what Israel has been since 1948 and just puts a bunch of it down in writing in a way that it was not previously. There were some dangerous clauses in there, but those were taken out, meaning things that would have allowed for foreign interference in Israel's religious and other affairs. Those were the risk clauses, as it were. What was actually passed is pretty innocuous by the standards of any other country on earth. There's actually an excellent article in the Wall Street Journal called "Israel is a Jewish State, Get Over It," by Eugene Kontrovich, where he goes through the various European countries that all have official state religions. There's only one Calvinist state, Tuvalu. Tuvalu is the only country in the world where Calvinism is the official religion. Is anybody accusing Tuvalu of being bigoted against other religions or other ethnicities? No. What about all the Christian states? What about all the states where Islam is the official state religion, including, by the way, Palestine, where the president, now in his 13th year of his 4-year term, has said that no citizen of Israel will ever be welcome in his state. And by the way, he did not mean Arab citizens of Israel.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you are real news. That's what I said. And I'm glad you brought that up. President Abbas of the PLO in the, what did you say, the 13th year of his 4-year term. That's pretty good. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to say that on TV when it comes up, because that's a good line. I mean, it's a 4-year term, and he served for his 13th year. That's not exactly what you would call a democracy there, is it? Right?
They use similar language across the board. According to Article 4 of the Palestinian Basic Law of the State of Palestine, Islam is the official religion in Palestine. Respect and sanctity of all other heavenly religions shall be maintained. According to Islam, how many heavenly religions are there?
One.
If you're in radical Islam, that's wonderful language. It really sounds like language of brotherhood and tolerance. Guess what the reality is? The areas that are under Palestinian control, there's no Jewish freedom of worship. There's no Jewish freedom to even live. There's actually, you want to find apartheid in Israel. Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Nobody else is allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Christians aren't allowed to either, because the Mufti is in control. And out on the West Bank, there are any number of villages with big red signs saying entry to Israeli citizens is dangerous. I've never been an Israeli citizen. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that I will walk in there and be greeted with flowers?
Mm-hmm. No.
I will not walk out, I'll tell you that.
all right, but look, I mean, there's some that are saying that the bill puts into law, Israeli law, what has already been, like you said, pretty much an active policy of segregation. But I mean, it's one thing to have a segregationist, divided society. It's another thing to legislate that into law. I think that's what is at issue here. You're saying it doesn't matter, that it's symbolic, but in Israel's constitution, the way I understand it, highlighting that is basically what they're saying is if you're a Palestinian citizen now, you're a second-class citizen in perpetuity. They're going to downgrade your language. I mean, what does that mean, Raabi? Does that mean if you speak Arabic, you're not going to be able to read a train schedule or a menu or what time the school opens? I mean, what does this mean?
Well, first of all, it's not. I mean, they said specifically in the law, the contents of this paragraph shall in no way denigrate from the status given, in fact, to the Arabic language before the application of this basic law. Israel is the only country I've ever been to where they routinely print street signs in 3 languages. Never seen that anywhere else. Mm-hmm. Israel is very focused on giving its minorities rights, but it's saying that Arabic has special status because there's a huge Arab population, but that's exactly the way Spanish is treated in the United States. The official language of business, you do not walk into the U.S. Capitol and expect to be able to conduct business routinely in Spanish, mm-hmm. even though it's spoken by a huge minority of the population of the U.S. Mm-hmm. Similarly, you don't walk into the Knesset and conduct business in Arabic.
Right.
It's not different in that regard. Although that in neither case, by the way, if a Hispanic person from, a delegate from Spain comes and sits down with somebody, a Hispanic representative or a Spanish-speaking representative in the U.S. House, are they mm-hmm. not going to speak Spanish with each other? Of course they will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Similarly, anybody is welcome to speak Arabic in the Knesset, but as matters of official business out on the Knesset floor, there's only one language.
So, Raabi, one of the other outcomes of this, which I've heard, I'm just giving you different perspectives, is that it's going to be very difficult now for those that are Palestinian, that live in the segregated areas. It's going to be very difficult for them to get money for roads and schools and sewage and things like that out of the government because of this law. Is that true or false?
As entirely false, simply because it's nowhere in the law. And this is what I mean. I mean, we're an American public policy organization. Our goal with regards to Israel is to say, leave Israel to be governed by Israelis. When they say, when they are a first world democracy and they are trying to do things right, they don't always get it right, but by and large they do. They're certainly way ahead of their neighbors. And there's nothing here that says that there's going to be any preference for non-Jews or anything else. But you see what Israel does that is completely reasonable, protecting lives and self-defense, and certainly would be accepted in any other country on earth, is judged by an entirely different standard. It's all of a sudden called racism to have roads that bypass Palestinian communities in the West Bank. Immediately they claim, that means that Palestinians can't drive on those roads. That's simply not the case. The problem is that when Israeli drivers would drive their Israeli vehicles through those Palestinian villages, they would get stoned and people would die. Mm-hmm. And then they created the bypass roads with these big barriers. And they say, that's a cage. Yeah. When you are driving down a road and there's this huge concrete slab leaning out over the roadway, it does kind of feel like a cage when you're driving in that road. But the reason for that huge concrete slab is to prevent cars from being stoned by the villagers up top. So this is the double standard by which Israel is routinely being judged. And as a matter of fact, at least several years ago, the top scoring schools in the country were the Arab Christian schools. They were not the Jewish schools. The Arab Christians actually were coming out of high school with the highest scores. And the valedictorian at Tel Aviv University was an Egyptian. Boy, did he find it a wake-up call. He decided to study in Israel, even though all of his relatives were telling him he's going to have a terrible experience. He's going to be there's going to be bigotry against him. He's going to be second class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's valedictorian of the school.
Mm-hmm. Common Sense News Time, 52 past the hour, live in Washington, D.C. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We are with Rabbi Yaakov Menken. He is the managing director of the Coalition for Jewish Values. So, where does this leave the peace process? Where does this leave the Jared Kushner grand plan, whatever that is?
I don't know if this is going to affect anything. I don't honestly know why the law was passed, what they felt that they were going to accomplish by it. They certainly managed. It's like poking the bear. Sometimes you don't. If the only thing that you're going to do is disturb the bear, it's probably a bad thing to do politically. Even though it might be entirely correct and innocuous on its surface.
Right.
So I don't know what this was all about. But as far as how it's going to affect the peace process, there's actually another piece of news out this morning that apparently the coalition between Friedman and Kushner and Greenblatt, they said to Hamas, you know what? If you guys abandon your goal of destroying Israel and return to Israel the Israeli citizens now in captivity in Gaza, which, by the way, includes a pair of regular Israeli citizens who managed to wander past the border into Gaza and were promptly kidnapped, and they've never been seen or heard from again. When you return those kidnapped victims, the people you have taken, abandon your desire of destroying Israel, and we will give you funding to rebuild Gaza. And we'll make sure that this time the concrete is being used to build schools and homes and even mosques, and not terror tunnels with which to kill Israelis. Now we're going to see if Hamas will take the deal. Is Hamas interested in the welfare of their own people? I thought it was a brilliant move. They're basically saying to Hamas, as long as you say you want to be peaceful and you want to prioritize the building of Palestinian lives rather than killing Israelis, we'll give you money. Let's see what happens.
So what happens is the Hamas has got to react to this because it's not a bluff, right? They've said if you take the money and you actually use it for schools and to rebuild Gaza, you can have it. Now, Hamas would then have to say, no, we don't want the money. This is why I think it was so effective. Hamas has to say, no, we don't want the money. We don't want to build schools. We don't want to rebuild Gaza because all we have to do is give you back the people that we kidnapped, and we'd rather have that as leverage rather than to help our people, right?
And declare peace. And to officially abandon their goal of murdering and kidnapping Israelis. And they could never do that. That's part of the Hamas charter. It's what they're about. The obstacle to the peace process is not Israel. The obstacle to the peace process is Itbach al-Yehud, kill the Jew. As soon as the Arabs abandon Itbach al-Yehud, peace will reign in the Middle East. It's very, at least in that part. I mean, I sad to say, it's completely wrong to say peace will reign in the Middle East because people imagine and continue to attribute to Israel the crises in the Middle East. I like to point out, when people talk about ethnic cleansing and racism and apartheid in Israel, etc., can you name for me the Arab state that still has even 10% of the Jewish population it had in 1948? Congratulations, you've named them all. You're done.
Zero.
Every single Arab state engaged in pogroms and massacres and expulsions. Iraq, in particular, gave Israel about 48 hours, said if you don't evacuate all the Jewish population, we're going to keep them here as prisoners. They didn't think Israel could pull it off. Israel pulled it off. All of those victims of ethnic cleansing now reside in Israel, where their descendants are being accused of ethnic cleansing. You get it?
Yes.
And that is what this narrative, the false narrative, is all about. So you have to look at where the real problem lies, and Iraq and Syria are two examples of countries that cleansed themselves entirely of their Jewish population since 1948, and things have gone marvelously for them ever since.
Rabbi, thank you. We're out of time. And great analysis, and I do agree also with what you said, that poking the bear for no reason. If there was a pot of gold under the bear, you could move him fine, but just poking it for nothing just doesn't make any sense. And that's what I was getting at with this, and I think you summed it up better than anybody. Thank you for that. We're out of time.